Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Oh, Hakanson just got picked. Oh, wow. God. Stop.
Go.
Good thing I was recording when that happened.
That's the intro. That's the intro.
That's the intro, yeah. I think that just started with the breaking news. The top. We're not going to be with football anymore.
Oh, come on, MLB Draft Tracker, pick it up. Draft Tracker, let's go. God, thing is slow. I got to wait 10 more seconds.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. You've literally caught us midstream. Jeff Sharon, Brian Murphy, and Eric Lopez with you.
Doing this now? I can't believe you.
Breaking news. The Tampa Bay Rays, with the 155th pick in the MLB Draft, have selected Jeffrey Hakanson of UCF. That's what we're leading with right now, in case you didn't hear. Literally, we started this show thinking nobody's going to get picked, and all of a sudden the Rays come. They're off the top rope come the Tampa Bay Rays. And now you have a busy night for yourself tonight, Brian Murphy, don't you?
Maybe a little bit, but it's exciting. I mean, we came tonight maybe hoping that a player or two would be drafted. I think we'll see another player or two maybe leave as a free agent, and we thought maybe a couple of their commits would be drafted. But as we're getting to pick 155 of 160, time's running short, and all of a sudden, Hakanson's name pops up on the screen. Hakanson. I shouldn't mispronounce it. Hakanson's name pops up on the screen. Jesus Christ!
We're too excited.
I'm very pumped.
I'm actually composing the tweet right now, as you can see. So we're going to talk about this.
Credit for this. I want to take credit because we thought about recording earlier, and I said, well, maybe we should wait till the draft in case one of our guys gets drafted. And look what happened. Literally as we started recording.
I know. Gotta love that. Hakan. This is like stuff happening right now.
All right, Murph. Well, let's talk about him here real quick because he had a monster year as a closer, dominant. You got a chance to talk to him during the season. You watched him. Your reaction here, literally minutes after he's going to the Tampa Bay Rays, 5th-round pick. Pretty exciting. I mean, you talk about a guy. 2020, a lost year. Well, it wasn't a lost year for Jeffrey.
No, I mean, it's he's one of those guys where it's just too bad that we didn't have a full season because what he was on pace for already was just insane. I'm trying to pull up the stats right now, but he only faced I believe he only faced like 28 batters this year. He struck out 20 of them.
Yeah,
he pitched 8 in the 3rd inning, struck out 20, walked 1, and he had, I believe, 2 balls hit out of the infield all year. It was a single and a flyout. Otherwise, it was all strikeouts and groundouts and infield pop-outs.
Can't do much better than that.
It was amazingly flat dominant. I know he got named to a first-team All-American by some outlet recently. Totally deserving. He's a guy who his velocity grew. Certainly this year he topped out at about 96. Sat constantly in that 92 to 94 range, could certainly pump it up to 96, 97. But the difference for him was developing a breaking pitch. He developed his slider, became much sharper, not as loopy. And when you mix those two things together, certainly at the college level, you can dominate. And he absolutely was just lights out, absolutely lights out. And it's just too bad that we didn't get to see more of him.
You're right about that. I just want to recap the stats. I'm sorry, Eric. He faced 26 hitters this season in the abbreviated 2020 campaign. Struck out 20, walked 1, gave up 1 hit, and hit a guy. So there you go. I mean, now that's not by the way to overshadow what he did in 2019, which wasn't quite as impressive, but still pretty doggone impressive. 26 and 2/3 innings. 52 strikeouts, 15 walks, gave up 10 earned runs, 11 total, gave up 16 hits. He was 1-0 with a 3.38 6 saves. So none of that stuff really mattered. I mean, 52 Ks in 26 innings. That's also pretty good. So yeah, I mean, you can't.
Just his ability to command the zone and to use the power, but to also know where it's going and to hit your edges and everything he did this year. It was just the perfect blend of a guy developing a guy getting better at his pitch ability, developing your breaking stuff, and really understanding the art of pitching. I mean, we knew he could throw hard, and yes, this year he threw harder. This year, he became a much better pitcher, and that's why he's a 5th-round pick.
All right.
Pick 155. Let me ask you this, Murph. Obviously, this baseball draft has a lot of storylines for a lot of reasons beyond UCF, which we're not going to get into. But it's a 5-round draft, and one of the interesting things I've noticed: a lot of relief pitchers in college have been gone in this draft. A lot of college players in general have been dominated by college, but relief pitchers have been going more and more earlier in drafts, and some of the theories is because they're the most ready to contribute right away out of the bullpen to big league teams. Do you think that helped Jeffrey from that standpoint, and could, as a result, with the Rays, who's a team that, as you know, Murph, like to use a lot of arms in their approach, could this be a path where Jeffrey's in the big leagues sooner than later?
I don't know about that. He's certainly not a guy who I don't think is going to be there within a year. I think he needs more time. I think he really is just sort of finding himself now. I mean, he was good certainly 2 years ago, and in 2019 had his season cut short. He had some injury problems that he had to deal with, but he really found the best of himself this year, and I still think he needs to work on that. So I don't know if he'll be on an ultimate fast track, but to your point, Eric, obviously we know it's a different game. We know what the thing now is: you don't want your starting pitcher to face a lineup the third time through. You want, unless you have a complete, stud ace on the mound, you want to be able to rely on your bullpen, shorten games, have your starter give you 5 or 6, and then bring in these relievers who throw, high 90s gas with some funky breaking stuff. And Jeff fits that mold. So yeah, you could see him being an effective reliever. I don't know if that means he's going to be a closer per se. Of course, on the Rays, there is no such thing as a closer. They don't.
Right.
They have great relievers who they make the closer, but that doesn't mean he's the guy. Just they mix and match their guys really well. But I certainly think because of his development this year, he has made his path to the big leagues that much clearer. He needed to show that with his stuff he could control it, and he did that this year. And if it continues, certainly you could see him be in the major leagues, because if you can throw hard but also be deceptive and control it, even if you're a one-inning guy, there's a spot for you.
You think that it might be the same situation where he's up as quickly as, like, say, a guy like Houston Street, right, who was drafted in 2004 when he was in Texas, and then the next year, 2005, he's closing out games for the Oakland A's?
No, I don't think he's that refined. Like I said to Eric, I think he's just finding himself now. He needs to like really just sort of build upon that. And it's too bad that he didn't get a full season to do that this year.
Right.
But I think he needs time to do that. By the way,
the Rays are a good organization to be developed, though. As you mentioned, they've developed quality arms out of the bullpen.
I mean, every franchise now is analytically sound, but I mean, we talk about guys who know how to use their pitchers the best and what roles work for them. Certainly, the Rays are top among them. I mean, they've done so many things that people have tried to copy off of, and they're just a really, really, really smart organization. So it's great to see that they have faith. Something they saw in Jeffrey, they have faith that he can certainly help them.
So he goes in the 5th round, pick number 155. Is that right? Okay, so
I was looking it up because there's been a couple other UCF players who've been taken in the 5th round recently. We had Thad Ward in 2018 and Jason Barr in 2017. But in terms of picks, in terms of overall picks, he's actually the earliest UCF player off the board since Eric Skoglund went in the 3rd round in 2014.
Wow, that's not bad. Pretty cool.
Yeah. What do you make of that, Murph, as far as the future here? There's supposed to talk about the draft being short and things like that. Do you will there? And I know, and this is a good segue. You got a chance to talk to Greg Lovelady about this, but what is the impact of the draft moving forward, where baseball's headed with this? And they might push it back up to 20 rounds. How does it affect the program like UCF, which usually gets a lot of draft picks, guys drafted, usually about in the 5th round or even later in the draft?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I said, it's not just UCF; it's everybody. You have so many more players in college now, or probably going to college or staying in college, because the draft is shorter, and it's not just that the draft is shorter, but if you don't get taken in these 5 rounds, and I'm currently talking as the last pick is on the clock, if you aren't taken in these 160 picks, I think the slot value for his pick is around $300,000. I think. I mean, he's going to make some pretty decent money.
Wow.
But if anybody who doesn't get picked in these 160 picks, they can only sign for as much as $20,000. So the money falls off drastically right away. So that's obviously influencing a lot of kids, especially juniors, who have 2 more years of eligibility, to come back and try to build their draft stock for next year when it's a 20-round draft. But also you have the seniors who are coming back, who aren't counting against the roster count, who have given another year of eligibility. Plus you have the influx of the freshmen. And right now, UCF has an 8-player freshman class that they're supposed to be bringing in for 2021. I'm not sure if all those players will make it to UCF for different reasons, but you add in those 8 players plus the guys returning, plus the juniors who thought they could have gone this year in the draft, and you've got a logjam. Now, I will say the logjam at UCF is not nearly as bad as other places, because they didn't have many seniors to begin with, and their class is kind of small. It's only 8 guys. So if you look at the guys they've lost and guys they've added, I think right now their roster is like at 36 guys, and on a 35-man roster, typically that's not that bad.
Well, that brings us to a great segue, by the way. Go ahead, Eric.
Real quick, so this is the 7th UCF player to be drafted in the 5th round in the history of the program for Jeffrey there. And Murph broke it down the last few rounds. But he's the 7th guy ever to be drafted in the 5th round. UCF's had 3 first-round guys picked in the first round. The history of the – can you name them, folks?
3 first-round guys?
Yes. Well, and here's a hit. 2 of them were a recent guest, and then another one Murph has talked to over the last year.
Justin Pope, Jason Arnold, and
Chad
Matola. That's right.
Who went 5th overall. He's the highest draft pick in the history of the program. He went ahead of Derek Jeter. That's what he's known for, the first round.
Yeah.
Well, he's known for more than that. I mean, let's be honest here. All right, so that gives us a good segue, because we one of the things we thought we were going to talk about a little bit more about was having to do with college baseball and how this all affects what UCF and a bunch of other baseball programs. Baseball is really getting hit hard by COVID-19 right now, and, as are a bunch of other Olympic sports. But we know that baseball is something that we hold near and dear to our hearts here at UCF. And Kendall Rogers actually tweeted out the other day, yesterday. The NCAA Division I Committee for Legislative Relief has given D1 baseball relief. It includes, for the 2020-2021 academic year, the 35-man roster cap has been lifted. There is no limit to the size of a roster. The annual counter has increased from 27 to 32. I don't know what that means, Murph. You'll have to explain to me. And then the 25% scholarship minimum has been eliminated for 1 year, which means there's 11.7 scholarships that you can hand out for college baseball. 25. In order for a scholarship to count, it must be for at least 25% of tuition, room and board, and all that, right? So that's right. That's what that means.
You have to give at least a quarter scholarship.
Right. Okay. So what is the annual counter? What does that mean?
So the count is the players on scholarship. So you have typically in a typical baseball season, college baseball season, you have a 35-man roster.
Mm-hmm.
27 of those 35 have to be on scholarship.
And those who are on scholarship, they must get at least 25% of their. Is it tuition and room and board, or is it other stuff too?
I'm not sure the breakdown of the scholarship, but that's how you spread around 11.7 scholarship among 27 players. is you give a bunch of guys, pieces of a scholarship.
Is it actually 11.75 or is it 11.7? Because I don't see how that works.
I've never heard that. I mean, I've always heard it's 11.7.
That's weird. Okay, I'll have to ask Lovelady this at some point. Who, by the way, you spoke to this week, Brian Murphy.
Exclusively.
An exclusive with Coach Love. So what's he up to?
He is. Well, it's funny. When I talked to him back in March after the season had just ended, he sounded like a guy who just didn't know what to do now because he's the guy who's never had things to really, the new things to plan in March. He's always just been on a schedule of baseball, and now he's got to find things to do. And I think the one thing he talked about a lot is just spending more time with his family, and he understands that for so many college coaches, you don't get these months with your kids. And he's got 2 young kids. I think one is 12 and one is 8 and one is 12 and one is 8. And so he gets time now to spend with them that he usually wouldn't. His oldest son, Noah, started playing baseball in a league about 3 weekends ago. So he's working with him and doing pitching with him and drills with him, and I think that has given him a real sense of calm and something to do now. He also said that they built in a pool in their house in January, which has been great. He called that a godsend because it means the kids have something to do. But I think he's just he's finding ways to spend the time wisely while also trying to prepare for next season.
By the way, his wife Lindsay is out here correcting D1 baseball on their tweet announcing Hakinson's Hakinson's pick. They initially tweeted out that he was picked by USF.
Oops!
Wow, really?
Oopsies! Yeah, they deleted it because Lindsay tweeted them out, and she's like, "Correction, UCF." By the way, Lindsay Lovelady is Hakanson. That's right. As I talk about a correction, I have to correct myself.
Yeah, I know, right?
Correct yourself there.
Yeah, so let's give it up for Lindsay Lovelady as well here. Go ahead, Eric.
Now, Murph, you talked about with Greg about the roster things. Now, just because this draft is over, it's now officially over as we record this, does not mean that there's not a chance that another UCF player could possibly end up signing with a Major League Baseball team. Just to kind of explain what's next, because this is all foreign now in baseball, where a bunch of guys didn't get drafted may end up signing as free agents with teams here.
Yeah, so I think going into this draft, UCF saw a number of guys, juniors, who they thought they could lose in this draft, and that group that was mentioned to me by Lovelady included Jeffrey Hakanson, Jack Sinclair.
It's not that easy, people.
Jack Sinclair, who's again a dominant reliever this year. Trevor Holloway, who was their best starter, I thought. Dalton Wingo, who was a complete stud last year, was not as good this year, but certainly a great hitter. And Colton Gordon, who was their Friday night starter this year in his first year as a transfer in. They thought those guys could possibly go in the draft, and if not in the draft, then sign later. I've also heard that Jeffrey Pena, the breakout player at the breakout center fielder, could also possibly go pro. I certainly don't think that Hakanson is the only guy that UCF's going to lose. I think there's at least one of the player who will sign as a junior for the $20,000 maximum free agent contract just to get their career started. We'll find out there, whether or not that's happening, in the next couple of days as guys sign contracts and whatnot. If I had to guess, purely a guess, I think Trevor Holloway is the most likely candidate to sign a contract, and people will go like, well, he is a junior. Why couldn't he come back and play his junior year and rehab his draft stock and come back for the 20-round draft? Why is he going to take $20,000, and that's maximum $20,000? Why would he take that now? Well, Trevor got married during fall ball last year, so his life's a little different, so he's got to provide, I think, now. There's more pressure on him to provide. So I do think, and talking with some people, they understand that that seems likely that Trevor would take the money and go pro now. But that's my guess. We will see if any of those other guys decide to sign contracts too. I would say, I would say that I think there's a little bit of surprise coming from UCF right now. I thought, talking to Lovelady and some other people, they thought there was going to be more than one player drafted, and then maybe they have a chance now to bring back more players than they thought. They also thought there were going to be a couple of their freshmen or high school commits who were going to be drafted. That didn't happen. So those guys could come to campus now. I think this is actually a pretty good night for the future of UCF baseball.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're seeing the strife. I'm sorry, Eric. We're seeing the real strife right now between the minors and Major League Baseball with the professional baseball agreement. There are not going to be a lot more opportunities for guys to show their wares in the minors next year if things keep going the way this is going, right? So, isn't it a bigger risk now to leave without being drafted because of that, in part at least?
It's a risk for everybody, even the kids who are drafted. I mean, yeah, you get some money, and I want to pull up the draft slot money that Jeffrey's getting. I think it's about $300,000. But what's also new this year with the draft is they're allowing teams to defer a lot of that money. So what you would typically get as a signing bonus, now is being basically deferred to next year and the year after. So even the money that he's supposed to be making now, he won't get until later because of this whole thing. And then you talk about guys, going to minor leagues, going to rookie ball now, where teams are shutting down and the landscape is changing. It's a weird time for everybody. It's a weird time for the sport in general. So I don't think it's just the guys who are undrafted free agents. I think it's guys who are drafted today as well that they understand there's a very uncertain future for minor league baseball in so many aspects, and they have to be aware of that.
All right. Well,
there's a lot of uncertainty on the coming back though to college baseball because of the rosters are just going to be enormous. Murph, I mean, there's guys. I mean, just because you come back doesn't mean you're guaranteed the same slots that you had, and you're going to have new faces anyway. And I know you addressed one of the new faces, and one is A.J. Jones, a kid that transferred from Jacksonville, pitcher coming to UCF, and perhaps in part to replace potentially a Holloway, or definitely replacing a Joe Sheridan, who I don't think we've addressed since on the podcast, but obviously has transferred and is now at Notre Dame.
Yeah, and so that really is the reason why UCF went out and got A.J. Jones, because they knew that once they knew that Joe Sheridan was going to transfer, and once they knew that Jalen Whitehead wasn't returning as well, a senior left-hander who was outstanding as kind of a swingman this year, starter reliever, he's not coming back either as a senior because he's got a job. He was interviewing for a job at a financial institution during the season. He got the job. He's going to take the job and leave baseball. So those two guys leaving the team opened up a spot for Lovelady and his staff to sort of go hunt for a replacement, which he said that they usually wouldn't do in this time. But when you look at the teams and the amount of experience the teams could possibly bring back, I mean, you're going to have teams out there that are bringing back a lot of seniors. UCF only had 4 seniors on their team last year, and only one of them is returning. He told us Jordan Rathbone is the only senior that Greg Lovelady thinks will return. And so that kind of leaves UCF at a little bit of an experience disadvantage. And I think they wanted a guy like A.J. Jones who can pitch out of the bullpen, but can also pitch as a starter, has pitched well as a starter for a couple of years, was really better at Jacksonville in 2019 than he was in 2020. But he gives them more, I think, safety and stability than hoping that someone like maybe a Zach Hunsaker or David Litchfield could transition to a starter, or they had to take one of their new freshman pitchers straight out of high school and make him a starter. I think they would rather pick a guy who has got that experience and that knowledge of how it goes rather than trying to fit someone else into that spot. And that's why they went out and got A.J. Jones.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a lot to unpack this coming baseball season. I don't think it's unfair to say that with everything that's going on at the pro level in baseball and everything that COVID-19 has done to college baseball, that college baseball right now is in just the most dramatic state of flux of any sport right now. There's just a lot going on.
And there's been some chatter about whether college baseball might change their model in the coming years. There's been some proposals. Murph, I know you addressed this with Greg Lovelady of this big proposal that some coaches are trying to get behind where the college baseball season starts later and goes into the summer. Just kind of address that because I know you asked Greg about that.
Yeah, so there's a proposal out that was kind of put forth about more than a month ago now from a panel of Power 5 coaches, mostly, but it also has the backing of many other coaches across D1, including Cliff Godwin at ECU. And again, it's just a proposal. There's nothing set in stone about this. This is a long way from happening and getting passed and being anywhere close from actually being a reality. But the proposal, if passed, would go into effect for the 2022 season. It's basically this, that they want to move the college baseball season back from basically the second week of February. You know that baseball season now starts around Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. They want to move back about 3 to 4 weeks to about the second week of March. Really for a number of reasons. One, it allows those northern schools, and not just your Sienas and your Wagners, but like your Ohio States and your Michigans, your Big Ten schools, to get more games in which there's more temperate weather. And so you get more fans and better attendance, and as those fans are there, they're buying more food and more concessions. So that creates more money. Also, if you're able to play those games at home because it's not as bad, the weather's not as bad, then you can obviously don't need to travel as much because all those northern schools come down to the south early in the year in February because they can't play in 20-degree weather up north. So there's that. Also, the schedule, the change in the schedule would mean that instead of a 5-week preseason as there is now that starts in January and goes up to February, we would actually have a preseason that covers 9 weeks. It would be a 4-week preseason and a 5-week preseason. To give players a larger ramp up, more of a runway to prepare for the season, which I think James Andrews, the very famous surgeon, is quoted in this proposal as saying, more ramp up time, more prepare time means you probably have less odds of an injury, and that's good too. I think talking to Love about this, he doesn't really know where to stand on this now because for UCF, they don't really worry about whether canceling their games or being a problem with their games in February. I can count on one hand every year the games in which UCF plays in which the temperature is below 50. I mean, really, and that's about as cold as it gets. So weather's not an issue for them, and they depend on those northern schools to come down for home games. So if those home games go away because those northern schools aren't traveling as much, does that mean UCF has to travel more? He doesn't know that. He was kind of just wondering aloud. And then secondly, because the season gets pushed back to March, it gets extended the other way too. The conference championship weekend wouldn't happen until June. You would have basically the College World Series being played in July. Well, that means obviously you need to keep kids on campus for a longer period of time, and time in which they're no longer in school, but you need to have those dorms running. You need to pay for meals, so that would create possibly more money that UCF has to spend. So I think for those kind of schools that like UCF, I think Lovelady right now is still trying to figure out what is best for UCF and where it really benefits them. But he also did say that if it is best for the game overall, he's all for it. But he doesn't want to do something only because it benefits a segment of schools, what he said the Big Ten schools, and doesn't equally benefit the other schools in the nation.
Me just kind of speculating here. This might, I don't know if this for sure, but this might actually end up, I think, possibly enabling some schools to maybe expand and add baseball as a sport once the pandemic recedes. Because, for example, like I in grad school at Syracuse, I went back to look at, Syracuse dropped baseball in 1978. It snows in Syracuse until May. But like if you push the season back, you might see some more of those northern schools, and also the fact that more of those northern schools picking up, because not only that, you also have an opportunity to get some better quality players if the minor leagues shrink. I think that's the other thing that might be too. I mean, I know that's way far afield, Murph, but could that be a possibility?
Yeah. Possibly, but again, this is so in the embryonic stages right now. I mean, it sounds good. There's a lot of things here about not only the weather being an improvement and then having more preparation time would cut down on injuries, but also because the schedule we pushed away from the start of the spring semester, that you would give more times to get their feet under them academically in the spring. So you would have more focus on education, obviously with less travel and more regional travel, you would have less kids missing classes because they're not taking, 3-hour plane flights anymore. So you have more kids in classes. So there's that part of it too. This has a lot of backing around the sport because of all of those areas in which it touches that it could benefit in. But I think for specific schools like UCF, which depend on all those home games from northern schools early on, which don't really worry about weather, and would really need to worry about, it seems like the only thing that could really impact me here is that I would have to keep my kids on campus for an extra month while the season plays out, while there's just no school going on. How much is that going to cost me? I think for those teams, they're still wondering how it impacts them. But like I said, I think Love is very much in the exploratory stages of his determination of how this helps. And he's going to take some time and make some phone calls. And he says if it's good for baseball, and if he's convinced that it's good for the sport overall, he'll do it. He'll agree.
Well, I'm actually curious, like how many players actually do live on campus as opposed to live off campus in apartments. I mean, that's
you also have to pay for those guys, to get pregame, postgame meals.
That's true.
Too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and don't underestimate TV's role in this. I mean, I've been told, but for a couple of years, ESPN's kind of wanted college baseball to push their season back because they could have the College World Series in July, which is usually traditionally a slow sports month. So from a program,
all you have there is the MLB All-Star Game, which ESPN doesn't even televise. So
another reason why they want to do this too is sort of get college baseball away from college basketball.
Yes. Yes.
And not have basically the first half of the season completely coinciding with the end of conference play in college basketball and the men's basketball tournament. So now, if you start around mid-March, you're starting your season during the tournament, but you would have most of the season happening after college basketball is wrapped up.
Eric, are the softball people?
Studies.
Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, and Murph, you can correct. There's studies they did on that. They feel that they can draw better pushing it back later, that more people would actually attend college baseball, and they think they could make it could become a revenue-making sport more consistently than it currently is.
And there's a lot of studies out there that attendance is a big thing in this proposal, and a lot of studies out there about how attendance goes up as the year goes on. And I think there's a bit of a quick connection made that the attendance goes up solely because the weather improves. And I think people, and Lovelady brought it up, but it's also something I thought about, and people have thought about. Attendance might go up as the year goes along because more people are interested to watch conference baseball and teams they know more than just your basic midweek non-conference games against teams you don't know from non-power conferences or uncompetitive teams. Also, by the time you get to May, the attendance might go up because you know how good your team is. And if your team is good, well, breaking news, if your team is good, you might have better attendance in May, and people want to come out and watch it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are being drawn here that maybe aren't, fully fleshed out, but it's a big discussion point across the sport right now.
Eric, are your folks on the softball side, are they thinking about doing the same thing?
No, we're not as smart as baseball is, so we usually tend to lag behind.
No one's even suggesting it?
No. I mean, I think softball tends to I'll give you an example. College baseball put in instant replay. You've seen it at the College World Series, and you've seen it in certain conferences. College softball still hasn't done that. They've talked about it, but they still haven't done that.
Not even at the College World Series.
Correct. There's no replay in the Women's College World Series. We've been screaming about it for years because the umpiring in softball is 10 times worse than baseball. But yet it doesn't get done. And the reason is, from what I'm told, there's a lot of quote-unquote purist traditionalists that don't want it changed. I don't think there's as many
who are these people
in baseball. Say what?
Who are these people? I mean, come on.
I'm not going to name them, but,
who are they? Golly. I mean,
you can figure it out based on some of how long they've coached in the sport. Things like that.
Do you think that they should? I think is my next question. Do you think that they should move the season back?
Now, let me just say this. I understand where Greg's coming from, having some caution, because if you're UCF, you have the weather is your advantage in recruiting, right, Murph? I mean, to say that, hey, you don't have to worry about snowouts or seasons being delayed or traveling for 5-6 weeks, like baseball and softball schools some cases have to do. That's a recruiting advantage. So if you're a team in the state of Florida, maybe you're not as excited about this because you might lose some of that leverage. So I think that is valid. But I think as a sport as a whole, as a fan of the sport, absolutely, I think it would be great. And I think softball should do it because softball has the same problems that baseball. In fact, they have it worse. I mean, I'll use our old friend, Renee Gillespie at Iowa. They travel they pretty much travel the entire non-conference season, which is basically over a month and a half. If you push it back, they can host games up at Iowa. Not just Iowa, but other schools as an example. So I do think it could push back. I do buy the theory of if you push it back away from basketball, because the one thing I disagree with, for example, there's been times last year, UCF's hosting Miami in a big baseball game. Well, you got people like Brian who flew to Dallas to cover UCF basketball. Yeah. So there's conflict there. And that's happened from time to time. There's a couple of years ago, UCF had a big baseball game on the week where UCF's playing in the NCAA tournament in basketball. So I do buy the theory of you run into basketball, people aren't going to pay attention to baseball or softball during the end of the basketball season unless the basketball season's gone south. So I think there's some valid points on both sides, and I think it's something that I'm fascinated to see where it goes. But I do know in the baseball side, that's been discussed for a little while. Softball, usually what tends to happen is softball will copy baseball probably about 5 years after the fact is probably what happens.
Interesting. But between that and, we've talked about it for 2 years. It got put on hold because of the pandemic, but between that and soccer, possibly splitting their season across the fall, we could see college sports in the next 2-3 years could look, even just how we ingest it, could look very, very different. What a fascinating thing. I mean, it's right. It's what I mean. I keep saying it, man. What a time to be alive! I'll tell you. Woo.
Well, goodness. And I'll tell you this. I mean, TV, as far as softball, has been a big TV revenue deal there. And now there's not ESPN, from what I'm told, has not pushed softball because they actually like the fact they can put softball as counter programming against the NBA playoffs when they don't have the NBA, because it does very well. It does a different demographic. College baseball doesn't do that. So there hasn't been the push from a TV side to push softball later in the year than they would for baseball, because they feel that baseball, when it's unopposed, college baseball, it does very well. Where they've run into problems is there's not many TV slots to fill because you have college basketball going on, or you're going up against college softball postseason. The American has been on ESPN News, their championship game, in part because there's softball regionals going on the ESPN networks. Yeah. So if you push baseball back, you could avoid that. And now all of a sudden you have more TV time slots available. So perhaps the American, instead of being on ESPN News as an example, could be on an ESPN or ESPN2 time slot because there's no softball to go up against or college basketball.
Wow. All right. Well, we're going to have to monitor things because I know that obviously the NCAA is dealing with the issue of just recovering from COVID-19 as well. But once we get through that cloud, then they're going to obviously have to start thinking about, all right, how are things going to look from here on out? And that's where I think we're going to get some more answers on this stuff. Great stuff, guys. All right, we're going to take a break. It's relatively a short show.
Exclusive.
Yes.
BlackGoldBanneret.com.
Yeah, I know. I told you we weren't going to talk about what was on the site right now, but yeah, we're going to do that anyway. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we got a little bit of football news. Short show this week because there's really, in terms of UCF sports, obviously, not a whole heck of a lot going on. There are much more important things in the country that need people's attention, but we're going to try and sort out some things with UCF football and players coming back after this. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy with you after that whirlwind first segment where probably one of the most entertaining first segments you ever had. I didn't even have the chance to get in a dad joke.
Where I cursed in the intro to lead off the show, apparently.
I know. Well, you know, we have technology for that. You know, it's 2020. We can take care of that.
Think about the Black and Gold Banneret Pod. We always record during the UCF guys getting drafted. So
I know.
Tradition continues.
We're there. It's a tradition unlike any other. Let's talk a little bit about football here because the plan for UCF football is actually in action right now. In terms of bringing guys back, 60 players came back for voluntary workouts this week, and the news broke that 3 of them tested positive for COVID-19. The statement from UCF stated that they are being looked after by obviously by UCF's medical staff, and also that they will isolate for 2 weeks. While whatever, obviously, you know, our thoughts are with we don't know who the 3 guys are. Our thoughts are with them and whoever they may be, and you know, and wherever they may be isolating, just hang in there and get better. Obviously, you know, I'm sure a scary situation. I know that obviously we know that the statistics on younger people who contract it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know you're out of the woods, obviously, but. Nonetheless, looking around the world of college football here in the state of Florida, at least, FAU and the UF stated that none of their players who came back for voluntary workouts tested positive for COVID-19. Florida State confirmed that some players did, but they did not say how many. As we look into this, first of all, Murph, if you could just kind of give us the lay of what the players are actually doing in this workout, and what do you think could be is the situation right now? Because this is obviously a real concern. You know, what happens if during the season this takes place? It's a really sticky situation from a medical perspective. You know, in terms of dealing with this, right?
Yeah, I think UCF is trying to deal with it the best they can. And you see so many schools that are having athletes come back to campus. I mean, they've drawn up their own battle plans for how they want to protect their athletes. And UCF, I think, has done, I thought they've put forth a pretty good effort to keep athletes safe and to know, you know, once someone is infected with the virus, that they have a way to quarantine them to keep other people safe. So basically, to run you through how this all went down.
Right.
60 football players were allowed to come back on campus on June 1st.
Now how many players? I'm sorry to interrupt. But how many players in total is UCF expected to bring back? Because obviously 85 scholarships and whatnot. And how do they determine who is coming on?
You have the 60 players who came back. Now, this on June 1st. Mm-hmm. Later this month, you'll bring in freshmen, I believe, in football and men's basketball, and then in July, the way it was worded is that players would have the option to come back in July for like other sports if they're allowed to come back. They could come back in July, but right now on campus you have 60 football players, so all of them went through a standard, standard COVID-19 test, whether it was, the nasal swab or the throat swab, I don't know, but they all went through that as they came back last week. And then everyone waited to see what the results were. During this time, UCF players are going through instruction about, basically how this is all going to be handled, what the protocol is going to be regarding, sanitary, and they have to go through health checkpoints every time they enter a facility. They have to get their temperature checked, and they have to, use a hand sanitizer whenever they enter a new building. The machines they use, because it's all individual workouts. So they're just working out inside the on-campus, football gyms. Those apparatuses have to be wiped down and sanitized after every use. You have players who have individual water bottles that are sanitized after every day, and then given back to the medical staff, and then returned to the player the following day after they've been sanitized. So they're doing all of this, getting ready to start workouts on June 8th. And then it comes back that 3 of the 60 players who arrived have tested positive. So now, basically what UCF has to do, or what they've done, is quarantine those 3 players. I'll talk about that in a bit. And they also have to make sure, in accordance with the other health officials in Orlando that they're working with, they have to make sure that the people that those players have been in recent contact with know that those players have tested positive. They have to do some sort of contact tracing where they have to make sure that the people that have been around those players know they've been infected, and to possibly look out because you might have been infected too. So just be aware. The players who are in quarantine now will be so for 2 weeks. Now, I don't know when the clock started specifically for these players. We were notified about this on Tuesday, June 9th. Now, again, the quarantine, though, could have started for some of these players last week once the test came back, or possibly Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. But they were quarantined now for 2 weeks, 14 days. They typically live either on campus or off campus in a dorm setting with probably 2 or 3 more athletes. Well, now they're living in a space that's been designated for them, each in their own dorm by themselves, basically, for the next 2 weeks. The only contact they have with the outside world is every day a medical professional for UCF or maybe one of the Orlando health organizations they're working with will come in and do a daily screening test. Basically just take their temperature, ask them how they're feeling, run through if they're having any symptoms, and just keep an eye on them. And then they get meals delivered to them through contact delivery every day as well. This will be their life for the next 14 days. After those 14 days in quarantine are up, those 3 players will then have to take 2 COVID tests in the span of 24 hours. Both of those tests have to come back negative. Once both those tests come back negative, then they will be allowed to re-enter the population and start working out again in the facilities.
Golly. I mean, this... Obviously, the health is the most important thing. But the thing that's, kind of a little frightening to me is what would this look like if the season were taking place, right? It's one thing for players to be among the among themselves in this in a practice situation, obviously, but now, I mean, golly, if this took place during the season, this could be a pretty scary situation for obviously the entire team and whoever UCF might have been playing at that time, or whichever school it might be. It's
certainly, but again, Jeffrey, we are trying to sort of cross that bridge when we get to it,
right?
And so we are about 2 months away from training camp really officially beginning, which we got sort of a thin outline of today. So we're just trying to get there first,
right? And
then we can worry about how often do you test them during a practice week for a game? Do you test them for a road game? Do you test them before they get on the plane, or after the night before a game, the day of a game, and then when you test them again? But that is all stuff that's probably going to be answered later on. I did ask a UCF spokesman about whether or not they're going to test, because all the coaches and administrators and players who are on campus, all of them have gone through a test already. And I asked if there were any plans to give anyone else another test at a later date. Now, currently, that is not in the plans. They would certainly test anyone as soon as possible if they begin showing symptoms. But there will be no, as far as I understand it, there's no plan to do any more asymptomatic testing for right now. And we don't even know the players who tested positive. We don't know if they might have been asymptomatic. They possibly could have been. Right. But we'll see. I think it's all very tenuous. What UCF has planned for right now really only runs through some parts of July, and then maybe into August when they start practicing for real for training camp. But this is going to be a developing and very malleable situation.
Yeah. Now there's no break in between this sort of workout period and then the start of training camp, is there?
Well, they are leading up to. I think there is. I mean, look this up. I believe there is a break at some point, but go ahead. I'm gonna look it up, and I know Eric had a question.
Yeah, sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
Well, Brian, I was trying to think. There was a player last year, if I'm not mistaken, that was not with the team for like a couple of weeks, and people were speculating what was going on, if he was okay or not, and it turned out he was not. He wasn't he was sick or something, wasn't it? Do you know what I'm talking about? Remember there was a player last year and people were speculating, could he be leaving the team or not? And, and he wasn't with the team at all at the game. He didn't travel and things. And it turns out they kept him away from the team. He wasn't, he was not healthy.
I don't want to speculate openly, and now I don't want to throw out any names, but so I have an idea of who you're talking about, but since I'm not sure, I'm not going to say.
Fair. No, that's fair.
Enough.
But my point is, that's probably what we're going to see during the season, hypothetically, is if a kid, does not, test positive, he's not going to be available for a couple weeks. You almost have to treat it like an injury, no different than if a kid goes down with a knee injury or a sprained ankle.
Well, no, it's very different because they can't rehab in the facility. They can't be on the sideline. They can't be anywhere. It's like they basically ghost the program for 2 weeks.
Right, but what I'm saying, and that's why I brought up the example last year. That was the case with somebody that wasn't around with a player. So I just think you treat it like an injury of sorts. I mean, I saw that's just the way it is, and they can't treat, but at least it's not an injury. You know where they're going to be. It's not like that deal. But you almost have to treat it like an injury if he's not available to play, and that's just I think one of the things that people have to adapt to. In this regard, that's just the way it is. I think that's how that's going to be treated. I saw where even Bruce Arians said that he's thinking about separating the quarterbacks in the room just for that reason. He doesn't want 3 quarterbacks catching it. If one gets it, he wants to have one available for that. So I'm wondering, it'll be interesting to see, and we won't know if coaches, who I think are, they always think of all these scenarios. I'll be interested to see. For example, in the quarterback room, do they split them up for that reason? Do they, caution? I will say this. I think they're in a good spot in that. I think the medical staffs and everybody, they will take care of them. They're going to be super watched. You could argue they're probably better off where they're at on campus with the trainers and the university there than they would be out in the public in
That's
some
fair.
places. So I think they will be taken care of very well. And I think that I trust the universities will handle it, especially in today's culture where you have to know every kid's medical situation. I think we've learned that over the years, over the decades, that you have to be on top of every condition every kid has on your roster because you don't want an incident to occur that could get you could be very unfortunate. So I trust in the medical staff. I trust in the universities. They're taking this very seriously. I've listened to Brian Haerlein, who's in charge of the NCAA. They're taking this very seriously. And I think they're working on the proposals. And like Murph said, it's you kind of go with it. So I don't think anybody's going to be irresponsible on this.
Yeah, I mean, we keep using the same term every single time, and it's kind of annoying. I can't say it, but we really are in uncharted territory right now with this whole thing. And it's just going to have to be one of these realities that we deal with. I mean, hopefully, my hope is, not just as somebody who covers this, but, with you guys, but also as a fan, is that we only have to wait on this, for this year. It only causes trouble this year. I think if it can, this thing is going to be around with us for a while, but football season is a season. It comes and it goes. As do the other seasons, because we're probably going to see situations like this with other sports as well that fire up in the fall, possibly with volleyball, soccer, assuming all that comes back the way we're expecting. Which
I think we have more questions about those.
Right? Yeah, because they're not even doing any workouts on campus.
No. And here's my bigger concern about them. football guys and men's basketball to some extent have charter planes. Olympic sports don't.
Right.
They got for the most
they fly
part,
commercial.
Travel on commercial. Is that really an appropriate? Is that really something you want to be doing in this climate right now? I don't know.
Well, that's where the whole regional scheduling thing was. Became a thing.
Sure.
So.
Well, but that's why I'm wondering, Jeffrey, if those sports get shortened because of that, because you limit scheduling, travel. You know what I mean? Like, are we headed for a shortened fall season in, for example, volleyball and soccer and things like that, because you eliminate travel, you save money financially? Could we be headed for a shortened season in those sports? And that might even expand towards next year with baseball and softball. Don't assume that we're going to have a full schedule next year. Even if we're healthy, even from a health standpoint, we're better off, which we all hope we are. Just from a financial standpoint, with all the financial loss, these sports might be, at least on the short term, have shortened seasons to save money that way. One of the, I'm in the softball, and one of the things I've been hearing a lot about is a lot of conferences are looking into going back to the old school conference scheduling ways of, instead of having single games on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, go back to playing a doubleheader Saturday and then a single game Sunday, because you're saving time and travel and you save money that way. So there's a financial standpoint that they got to deal with, and there's also the health standpoint. They got to balance all that out. And I think it's the same with football. That's why we're not even going to try to speculate what's going to be with football season, because I don't think anybody honestly knows as of right now what we're going to have for as far as a football season is concerned. Anybody that suggests they think they know is nuts, because this thing could evolve. We could have a completely different conversation in 2 to 3 weeks. We might well. And then again, we could have a different conversation in 2 months with all this. So I think, but I do trust the medical staffs at these schools with these student athletes, because they constantly take care of them. They constantly watch over them to begin with in a normal circumstances, let alone the current circumstance.
True.
And we have to look at it too from this point of view, which is cynical and sort of it's not very humane, but it's part of the factor. These players are commodities for these schools. They make them money. You have to keep them healthy. So especially for your football and your basketball team players, you have to do it. You can't just you have to be on them to be healthy and ready to play, because that generates so much of your revenue as a department, as a university. So yeah, they're going to be on top of this a lot. And I know we talked about, you guys talked about the non-Olympic sports and the challenges and the challenges there for the Olympic sports, but for the football and basketball especially, they're going to be on these kids like hawks, making sure that if they have any cough or anything, they go right away to get checked.
Yeah.
Well, and the conversation that's going to have to be had is, and the one issue I do have is all this talk about having fans at the games. Are we sure that's really a good idea? I think those conversations have to be had probably by a lot of different people, because my only concern is, are these schools going to allow fans in because they want to make up their money and not be at the expense of health? I hope that's not the case. But I do worry about that, because I have a bigger worry about where a kid you could have a situation where if you bring fans in or parents are at the games, well, they're going to try to reach out to the kid. Hey, how you doing? And all of a sudden now that's how we could get really a bad situation, make it worse.
Well, it's interesting. We got a little bit of an indication of that from Memphis this week, because their athletic department announced on Wednesday, this is according to the Commercial Appeal, that they are one of the things that they're thinking about doing is having only season ticket holders be allowed to attend games at the Liberty Bowl. Now, Liberty Bowl is a big stadium, and Memphis, as far as I know, I don't know how many season ticket holders they have.
I read 20.
20,000. The Liberty Bowl holds just short of 60,000. Right. So that's one in every.
Might make it easier. Might help them spread it out more than UCF at the Bounce House. And I think that's an interesting question. Mike Bianchi asked Danny White when he was on the show a couple weeks ago about would they consider playing at the old Citrus Bowl, because it's a bigger stadium, might be easier to spread out people if you decide if there are people in the stands.
Yeah, but I don't know about that. Just based on the fact that you're going to be paying rent. Like, why would you do that?
No, we don't. But that's something they have to figure out. What is the safe, appropriate deal? Now, again, this could change drastically. I mean, in a month from now, we might be in a situation where you don't allow people in the stadium, or they might, and people might feel good about it. But I think those are questions that have to be addressed, because I worry more about, and it's simple math. The more people that are involved in the area, there's a higher risk. I don't think that's
well, obviously
crazy.
Murph, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just saying during as you were sort of trying to figure out what to say next, I was just sort of butting in by saying there's a lot we don't know, and so
right.
It's hard to say right now, but we know that it's hard to say, and we're just sort of talking in circles at this point.
Right. Yeah. Which seems like it's a good idea for us to call it a show. Not going to ask any of you guys, either of you guys, what you got on tap for this week, because we don't know what the hell is coming up this week. We're still working on
I do have a little bit of a note that might be a little weird that could affect UCF, that could come out next week a little bit.
Okay.
It's a TV standpoint. So let's assume things go as scheduled. Let's assume everything goes as scheduled. With UCF starting on schedule against North Carolina, et cetera. Let's just assume that. It is expected on Monday, or as early as Monday, that the U.S. Open will announce whether they're going to go ahead and play the U.S. Open tennis tournament this year, which begins in late August and goes for a couple weeks. Why is that significant to UCF? Well, ESPN owns the rights to that. From what I'm told, ESPN, which pays USTA, by the way, about $70 to $80 million a year for the rights, not only for the U.S. Open, but other U.S. tennis programming and content, which I'm not going to get into. But if the U.S. Open does go on as scheduled, and the NBA, which as we record this, has not announced their schedule yet for their return in the playoffs, but I do know that on that night of the scheduled UCF North Carolina game, they will have second round NBA playoffs are scheduled to take place that night. So you could have a situation where ESPN has U.S. Open tennis coverage, could have an NBA conference semifinal coverage, and UCF North Carolina. That's a lot of sporting events.
Not to mention baseball going on at that time.
Baseball, we don't know if ESPN will have carry games that night or not. Who knows? But you're right. There's a lot in the plate. So that could affect where you see the UCF North Carolina game, where it could be, instead of an ESPN or ESPN2 game, it could be an ESPNU game. It could be an ESPN News deal. The start time could be drastically affected by that. If they decide to have the NBA and at night, they might tell UCF and North Carolina to play in the afternoon, or it could be the other way around. We don't know. But first step is first. We might get a hint. We'll see if the U.S. Open is announced they will go on. Now, if they don't, then that's one less programming that UCF, in theory, would have to worry about that night. But that is something to monitor this upcoming week if you're into the whole UCF television exposure coverage.
Man, we are heading for the mother of all sports equinoxes this fall. Oh, my gosh. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret, Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret as well. Follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, and Spokes_Murphy. Well, fellas, who made it through, hopefully we'll have another week of some good news coming through for us. But it's been wow, we had some breaking news tonight, and it's been fun. So take it easy, stay safe. I'll talk to you guys soon. All right.
Bye.
All right, and thanks again to you for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Stay safe, everybody.